Good day, YouTubers. Thanks for joining me. This is video 46 in my series of videos on the Ontario Northland NHO scale. And today we're taking a look at the Rapido FP7. This was released in 2019 by Rapido Trains and is just an incredible model. 2019 was a big year for Ontario Northland fans with a lot of releases and a lot of attention by Rapido in particular. So great acquisition to the collection here in front of you, but definitely very hard on the bank account. So Rapido released a total of 14 different road numbers across 3 different paint schemes. There was some duplication of road numbers between the paint schemes, but that was understandable, and I'll explain that as we work our way through here. An incredible level of attention to detail on these models. So first I've got unit 1505 in the classic green paint scheme on my rolling road, and I just want to fire up so we can appreciate the great job that they've done on the sound functions on this locomotive. So first I am pressing 8 for the startup sequence here. And now revving her up a few notches. So that sounds just great. Now I'm in a small room here, so I've got the volume level set way down by working my way through the CV settings. CV63 controls the master volume on this model here. So if you're detecting a little bit of actual running gear noise there, I would suggest that it's just a function of the room that I'm in. It's a relatively quiet running locomotive and incredible low speed running characteristics. We'll take a look at it on the track here in a second. But first I'm going to rev it up a little bit just so that we can appreciate the Doppler horn effect. So we've got 2 Doppler horns here. The first is a slow Doppler horn. And now a fast Doppler horn effect. So I've got the sound off there for a moment, and what we're going to do is move it over to the tracks and then take a look at some of the lighting functions on this locomotive. So you'll see unit 1505 creeping slowly through your frame here. Just wanted to talk about the the beautiful low-speed running characteristics here. My units aren't completely broken yet, so still a tad on the jumpy side, but that'll only smoothen out with time and use. But a very high quality locomotive in regards to running characteristics. Now backing her into frame here again. We're going to talk about some of the other functions and the lighting functions. So first off, I'm going to turn off the prime mover sound. So a nice shutdown sequence there. So you can see right now I'm turning the headlight on and off, and function 7 dims and brightens that headlight. You've got function 9 for the white class lights, function 10 for the green class lights. You do have the ability to install ditch lights on these. The lighting is already pre-installed and behind the frame. It's just a matter of installing the actual ditch light housing on the front of the locomotive. That is more appropriate for the chevron units to your left there. I haven't done that on any of my locomotives yet, but I will get around to that here someday. So with the unit turned around now, I want us to talk about the light on the back of the locomotive. So that is function 18. With the locomotive turned around again, just taking a look at those lighting effects from a different angle. Your green class lights and your white class lights. Headlight and the dimming and brightening of that headlight. And now you can see that I've turned those running board lights off. And now you can see that I've turned those number board lights off, and that is function 17 to toggle that on and off. So taking a closer look at the locomotives now, and starting here with 1505 again. So this is the classic paint scheme that we would have seen on these locomotives through the 50s and 60s and even up into the 70s. This doesn't represent how these locomotives looked as delivered. Fresh out of the factory, the lines weren't connected in the front, and that shield was placed lower, interrupting the lines. The paintwork at the front of the locomotive was quite promptly modified by the Ontario Northland within the first few years of the locomotive service. So you can see that incredible attention to detail in regards to handrail placement and such. You've got that GMD division logo there by the steps. Great quality body detail, including the back of the locomotive there. You have your winterization hatch there on the top of the locomotive. Now here we've got locomotive 1500, the class leader. Same details as locomotive 1505, just illustrated. Locomotive 1501. Locomotive 1504. Locomotive 1509. And it's with locomotive 1519 that we are starting to see some detail differences here. We've got far grills in place of the grill style illustrated on the locomotives here previous. I'll see if I can get two into frame here so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So we've got locomotive 1509 with that original grill style on the side of the locomotive, and then 1519 with the far grille. Now into the next paint scheme here. We've got locomotive 1517 in the progressive paint scheme. Ontario Northland did repaint 3 of their locomotives into this paint scheme in the 60s, but it was fairly short-lived. In fact, I believe that most of these locomotives were actually repainted back into the original paint scheme prior to being repainted into the final modern chevron paint scheme. So these 2 locomotives, 1517 and 1521, are both from that last batch. And you can see that far grille. This is really a sharp looking paint scheme, and the green and the white and the handrail details and such all seem to really pop here in the white. Just a great looking locomotive, and now you've got the provincial crest moved in behind the number boards. Here's the other progressive paint scheme unit, 1521. Same details as locomotive 1517, including the far grille. And now into the modern chevron paint scheme. We've got unit 1515 here that illustrates how these locomotives would have looked. A lot of work obviously went into making these units as accurate as possible. Everything here is right on from what I can find picture-wise and such. Now 1515 is I think from the second batch locomotives, and it did include the earlier grille style on the side. 1508 was also a unit that was repainted into the modern chevron paint scheme, and like 1515 there, it's got the earlier grille work on the side of the car body. Unit 1502, again identical to 1508 and 1515 in regards to the grille style and other locomotive details. Now we saw locomotive 1517 in that progressive paint scheme, and here we've got 1517 again in its final modern paint scheme, and this locomotive is illustrating those far grilles. Now, I understand that Rapido chose to duplicate some road numbers here, given the fact that there were too many detailed differences with some of the other road numbers that they were looking at producing. Here's locomotive 1521, same as we saw in the progressive paint scheme again, but obviously repainted into the modern paint scheme here later in its life. And something I wish to point out is that this unit at some point acquired the earlier grille style on the side. So 1521 in the progressive paint scheme illustrated the far grille work, and this illustrates on both sides that earlier grille work. Now the locomotive that really blew me out of the water here in regards to attention to detail is unit 1520. So 1520 is one of the last original FP7's that remained in service, and a bit of a unique oddity in the fact that it had the far grille work on the one side of the locomotive, and then the traditional grille work on the other. With a unit from all 3 paint schemes here lined up side by side, I wish to point out a few spotting differences. So the most obvious here being that on the progressive / modern paint scheme unit, the bell has been moved to the roof, and that this unit is also showing the installation of the grab irons above the windshield. It seems like the literature is calling these eyebrow grab irons from what I can find. They do include those grab irons as an additional piece that could be applied on the progressive unit, but taking a look at the photographs that I can find, it doesn't look like they were installed, perhaps just very late in their lifespan in that paint scheme anyway. And then 1509 is more as delivered. So with each locomotive comes a little poly bag of detail parts. What I'm showing you here is the bag that comes with the original paint scheme units, such as 1519 and behind. So you'll see it includes a vestibule and such for the rear of the unit, some additional grab irons, a roof antenna, some eyebrow grab irons for the top of the unit above the windshield, and then finally two sheets of either plywood or metal that were applied to the side of the unit with the polar bear. And this was often put on these units when they were in service pulling the Polar Bear Express. Here's the box that these locomotives have been delivered in. It's part of their True North series of locomotives. Genuine Canadian motive power, exclusively from Rapido Trains. And this is the same style of box that we're seeing most of their locomotives delivered in here these days, with the road-specific information on the end of the box. So I've got 1520 on the tracks here now, and what I wish to illustrate is Rapido's sense of humor. So I think we've all gotten used to their nutty YouTube videos and some of the humor in their advertising and in their instruction manuals, but they also seem to hide some sound clips in their functions, and we will end this video with listening to their function 19 for this specific locomotive.
Hey, I'm not a lumberjack or a fur trader, and I don't live in an igloo or eat blubber or own a dog sled, and I don't know Jimmy, Sally, or Susie from Canada, although I'm certain they're really, really nice. I have a prime minister, not a president. I speak English and French, not American, and I pronounce it about, not about. I can proudly sew my country's flag on my backpack. I believe in peacekeeping, not policing. Diversity, not civil